Você deseja viver de audiovisual ou se destacar nesse mercado? Então conheça o AVE Makers, a principal escola online para filmmakers e fotógrafos do Brasil. Aqui te ensinamos tudo o que você precisa saber para alavancar a sua carreira. Eu sou Bruno Baltarejo, coordenador de audiovisual, e nesse vídeo eu vou te apresentar o portal. Com mais de uma centena de cursos e formações completas, da pré à pós-produção, e indicado a todos os níveis, tanto para quem nunca abriu um software ou ligou uma câmera, quanto para quem já é profissional. Aqui no AVE Makers você encontra o conhecimento que você precisa em diversas áreas como edição de vídeo, color grading, motion design, efeitos visuais, direção de cena, direção de fotografia, operação de câmeras, drones, gimbals, iluminação, videoclipes, documentário, gravação e mixagem de áudio, fotografia still, tratamento fotográfico e muito mais. Já são mais de 12 anos formando filmmakers e fotógrafos em todo o Brasil, com conteúdo testado e aprovado por mais de 25 mil alunos que já passaram por aqui. Veja só alguns diferenciais que a nossa plataforma oferece. Pelo preço de praticamente um curso, aqui você encontra mais de 110 cursos de audiovisual e fotografia, um ano de acesso completo à plataforma, cursos novos frequentes, suporte direto com os professores, material para exercício e construção de portfólio, documentos e ferramentas para o dia a dia de trabalho, plano de estudo personalizado, certificados de conclusão e acesso offline através dos aplicativos para Android e iOS. Viver do seu sonho depende de você. E nós vamos dar aquele empurrãozinho com cursos e formações ministradas por uma equipe de professores renomados e profissionais atuantes no mercado, cada um te ensinando as melhores técnicas, caminhos e práticas dentro de sua especialidade. Não perca tempo, junte-se agora ao AVE Makers e comece um curso hoje mesmo. Um abraço e te encontro no portal do aluno.
Boa noite a todos, meu nome é Emílio Santor, sou organizador da mostra Filmes de Montanha. Quero agradecer a presença da Sara, que vai estar apoiando a gente aqui na organização, a Marisa, que vai fazer a tradução, e o Marcin Polar, que é o diretor do filme Harda de Tot, que está aí já presente também. A mostra tem como objetivo principal abrir uma janela de exibição de filmes com o tema montanha, para uma experiência, a princípio era em tela grande e em grupo, né? Mas nessa quarta edição tivemos que reformular toda essa ideia do evento para realizá-lo online. Então este ano a mostra é composta por 25 filmes de 11 países, sendo 8 filmes brasileiros e 17 estrangeiros. Só para relembrar, né, o evento vai até dia 4 de outubro, todos os finais de semana, e o formato continua esse mesmo, exceto no encerramento, que será, né, no dia 4 de outubro, totalmente ao vivo, e inicia somente domingo às 19 horas, tá ok? Quero agradecer novamente aos nossos patrocinadores, a VIT, a Deuter, a Spot e a Gente de Montanha. Da organização já agradeci, então tá ok. E O evento, apesar de ser gratuito, ele tem algumas horas que a gente trabalha e se organiza para fazer não só a legenda, como a Cíntia comentou, né? Toda a organização, divulgação do evento, ir atrás dos filmes, né, com os realizadores, contatos, parcerias. E nós criamos, então, 3 formas, né, de vocês poderem apoiar o evento. Uma delas é através da divulgação. Basta nos seguir no Instagram, @mfmbrasil, e compartilhar nossos posts, né, nosso conteúdo. E, além disso, você pode chamar o seu amigo que você pratica algum tipo de atividade outdoor com ele, né, para participar do evento. Outra forma de apoiar o evento é adquirindo essa camiseta, a camiseta oficial da mostra, desenhada pela Adriane Ferreira. Eu vou deixar o link ali no bate-papo, no chat daqui a pouquinho, tá ok? E a terceira forma de apoio é através da colaboração voluntária. Você pode colaborar com o valor que você achar justo e puder colaborar também, né? A gente sabe que nesse momento não está fácil para muitas pessoas. Então é isso, a Sara já colocou ali no chat, né? Se vocês quiserem fazer alguma pergunta, podem já começar a fazer as perguntas e vamos começar agora sempre no começo eu costumo perguntar para os realizadores, né? Como que surgiu a ideia de fazer o filme, de por que fazer esse filme, porque ele acha a importância de fazer esse filme e como foi essa experiência. Então eu peço para o Márcio, se ele puder contar um pouquinho para nós dessa experiência dele, por favor. Ah, tá. Deixa eu liberar o áudio das pessoas aqui, senão ninguém fala nada, né? Liberou, Marisa?
Liberou. Boa noite a todos. Good evening, Marcinho. Thank you for taking part of this festival. Emilio has the first question for you. He would like to know where did come the idea of making this movie?
The idea came out from myself, from my life, because before I decided to start this film, I was a cave explorer. Like I started a special course of the exploring the caves in high mountains in Poland. I did this activity for about 5 years, maybe more, before I started the preparation to try to shoot this film. And the first idea I have was that maybe in future I will try to find a subject of the documentary interesting enough to shoot the film in this kind of places as caves, because my first impression when I was in some exploration trips was that these areas is very nice for filming itself, like how the light works in these places and this darkness. It was so specific, like a little universe, totally different than we see daily. That it will be very, very interesting for shooting the film. But I didn't have any interesting person of personality or some kind of character which I can put to the film. And one day I started to think that maybe Jarek, the main character, could be this one, because he said to me that he found a place, a brand new place in High Tatras, and he thinks it will be something big. like something maybe the biggest in last 10 years, maybe more in exploration in Polish High Tatras. So firstly, I started to think that maybe we can just try, like go there with camera and try to make some kind of test shooting to check is the okay or not, because when they are exploring this place, it's only one chance to film this exploration process. So I was thinking more about this documentation of this achievement, exploring this new place, and I didn't had a idea from the beginning it will be a regular documentary about it. I was thinking that maybe in the future I will use this experience to try to shoot something bigger. But during the process of shooting, it's starting to be so interesting that I decided that maybe this is this chance. Maybe I don't need to wait for something different, but I just to focus myself on shooting this character and this situation. And that's how it started. I was applying for some funds in Poland to make a regular production. It was not so hard because many people didn't believe in that this is even possible. But I was very like strong in my mind to go to the end with it. And one day, the Munch Studio, the co-producer, like main producer of this film, they gave me that chance. That they were very impressed how I presented the situation. I have a short edited like 5 minutes piece of film, and when I show it to the commission, they finally decided to fund this film, and that's how it started, like the regular shooting of this.
Okay, thank you. Nossa, uma longa história,
Very
mas
long,
vamos
very
lá.
long.
No começo, a ideia surgiu dele mesmo, né? De ideias da vida dele. E ele sempre foi um explorador de cavernas e ele começou a se preparar 5 anos antes dessas filmagens. E começou a estudar as cavernas, como seria, tudo mais, e ele não tinha nenhum personagem em mente. Se preparou durante 5 anos e achou, inicialmente, era para ser um filme no futuro, uma coisa mais adiante. Mas quando ele começou essas filmagens, a ter essa ideia, ele encontrou esse personagem, o Yarek, e que explora cavernas, então ele pensou que poderia ser o personagem para o filme dele. E enquanto eles estavam fazendo as filmagens, eles viram que era algo muito bom, que eles poderiam já fazer essa produção agora, para esse momento, não precisavam deixar mais para o futuro, então tiveram a ideia de fazer o documentário. No começo foi muito difícil encontrar alguém para fazer essas filmagens, porque ninguém acreditava, achava que era uma ideia muito difícil, que era uma situação muito difícil para realizar, quase impossível, na verdade, mas finalmente quem é o coprodutor dele entrou em contato e decidiram fazer o filme. A princípio era uma ideia para um filme no futuro, mais adiante, né? Mas como viram que deu tudo certo. E lá dentro das cavernas, ele falou que é um outro universo, a iluminação, ele quis explorar muito essa parte da iluminação, do ambiente, e foi isso, foi daí que surgiu a ideia de fazer o filme agora e não esperar para mais adiante.
Legal. Antes de eu fazer a pergunta aqui do público, eu quero só fazer uma perguntinha, que acho que dá para dar uma introduzida. O filme do Marcin, ele tem uma linguagem diferente dos documentários comuns, né? Mais tradicionais que a gente costuma ver. Ele é 100%, como que eu posso dizer, contemplativo, né? Mais visual e muito sonoro também, né? Mas ele não tem diálogos. Por que dessa escolha? Por que ele fez essa escolha sem diálogos? Se é um estilo dele, de produzir ele como diretor, ou o que ele achou melhor que seria assim, enfim. Essa é a minha dúvida.
Emilio has one more question, Marcin. He noticed that your movie, you don't have any speech. You worked the sounds of the cave and the visual. You didn't work lines. You didn't have lines in your movie. Why? Why is this?
It was a huge process during shooting, which the finally form of the film was like developing, because for me it was brand new experience, and of course I didn't film like everything without speech. I film action and what this character is doing. He was not always alone. Then he was with his partner. They are exploring together, talk to each other about many technical stuffs. But finally, during editing, when I trying to put these regular scenes of exploring to the film, some kind of magic were like disappearing. The whole thing which is strong in this final cut of the film is like essence of the essence of how your senses feeling this exploration, this fight with the cave, going deeper and deeper to the smaller and smaller places, and we noticed with the editor that that this effect is more stronger when you are not putting some technical dialogues to cut them, because when I put a scene when my character is just talking, oh, go there, we need to try to take the stones to the other place to go, or something like that, is like normal, and it's destroying this like cosmic kind of small cosmos, underground cosmos, and this feeling of the senses. So this destroying this impression of the editing, and that's why we decided that we are putting all these things to the rubbish place, and not putting into the film. We are just trying to find the best visual and sensitivity like scenes which can affect audience to be a participant, to feel that on their own skin, and that I name it like that. This is like not a kind of a regular documentary, but more like visual and impression documentary. That kind of like my own vision of this activity, like a little, we can say, like, I don't like this word, but on like little artistic way, maybe. we can name it like this.
Marcin, I have a comment to make. Just before we started, I said to Emilio that I felt really, you just said you wanted the audience to have the feeling of being in the cave. And I had that feeling, and I told Emilio I was very claustrophobic, and I felt like I was really there. It's okay.
Yeah, I had situation once that one woman was very upset during one screening, because she was very claustrophobic, and she was complaining that it should be written before screening that people with claustrophobia should be warned because they can have a kind of attack during watching this film.
Oh yeah, I didn't know until today I was, but I'm not. But I felt I had a strange sensation. Nice movie, no, just
Thank you.
então vamos lá. Ele decidiu, ele geralmente faz filmes com falas, né? Mas nesse filme ele decidiu, depois das filmagens, que ele queria realmente passar essa sensação que as pessoas que estavam lá na caverna tiveram. Então, inicialmente foi gravado, sim, e ele achou que lá embaixo, lá na caverna, sem as falas tirariam ele até usou a expressão, essa sensação cósmica de estar no subterrâneo. E depois, na hora da edição, eles jogaram tudo para a lixeira, as cenas que tinham falas, e decidiram deixar somente o visual, e para que realmente o público tivesse a mesma sensação das pessoas que estiveram lá na caverna, sentissem as mesmas coisas. Então, foi por isso que no final eles decidiram tirar as falas e deixar somente as cenas e mostrando somente as pessoas que estavam na caverna.
Legal, obrigado. O Anderson Pacheco Soares, de Caxias do Sul, Rio Grande do Sul, quer saber que técnica, né, ou quais técnicas usaram para estar filmando nas cavernas junto.
We have a question, Martin, from Anderson. He is from Rio Grande do Sul, south of Brazil, and he would like to know which techniques did you use to film under the cave?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this question opens a very wide discussion because the mix of techniques I developed by myself to not destroy the film stuff and all I need to carry to make this to film the scenes. It was a very complicated, but I had to be open. I had to be open-minded to some kind of homemade techniques. For example, to carry the camera, lenses, and the light. I used kind of barrels which you usually use for putting like cabbage or something inside, you know, like small plastic barrels, but with this upside hole, wide enough that I can put the camera inside, but the main barrel was not wider than it, because the places when I had to put this stuff through were very tiny, and one place was so tiny that the barrel I had was we had to squeeze it a little bit to get it through. So I put some soft material inside, then I put the camera on it, put the cap on, and then we transport in a regular cave bags. Like it was like very simple bags without any stretches to not hook it or something, and the camera, I filmed it in 3 cameras, but mainly shooting in 2 cameras. I started to shoot in a Lumix GH2 camera, because the film was filming for for 4 to 5 years. So it's kind of long period of time that the technique is changing, cameras are changing. So during the filming, I decided to buy the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera. It's the smallest camera developed till today. I don't know, is there something smaller? It's so small as a regular smartphone or some kind of that, like small, very small amateur camera, but it's a regular film camera. And to this Blackmagic Pocket, I put some kind of booster, which is like focusing the light on a smaller sensor from the wider lens, and it affects that the lenses you put to camera are even brighter than they are without this booster. So it allows me to film in the darker areas, without using so many lights that I need. Very fast lenses, like 1.8 to have enough light. And in lightening the scenes, I used I was trying to, when I started filming, most of these scenes are not in the film, but when I started filming, I was using a lot of like LED panels with batteries, of course, and I'm putting into the same kind of barrels as a camera. And I was trying to make like a beautiful view on the cave, this interior of the cave. But during the filming process, I decided that it shows it's too much beautiful that it is actually like as the cave explorer feels that cave is not that kind of effect. It was too much like adventure, beautiful place, and even I observed the effect of this very beautiful lighted scenes, that this cave doesn't feel like some kind of dangerous and like unpleasant for people. It looks like a very cozy place with the nice areas around. And then I decided that I need to remove this light, just trying to be focused on the lights on the head of the explorers, and using my own headlight, just to trying to put little light on a wall to make it like kind of use it as a blend to make it like not so strong and little softer, and use that small pieces. The less light is the better. And for the scenes which are in the very low level of the cave, which as you can imagine, you can remember that it was kind of feeling that the deeper we going, this like darker, and the light is more like in contrast, more contrasting and like and cold. So in that place, in the places around the end of the cave, I using just one light. It was like hand lamp for a kind of military light, and I just used it. I put it in the middle of the rock, some farther, just to show the water falling, and this fog coming from the body of my character, and yeah, it was a lot of combinations. Once I changing light to something a little softer, once a little harder, to make an impression that the deeper we are going, the cave is getting like more cold and more like dark. And so yeah, so it was kind of play with the lights, but very small, very small, like not powerful light, just with a small level of light, very low level, and combination. It was not a lot. Like I had just 2 LED panels, one this military light, and our headlamps, and it was all. The rest, we will have full bags of our exploring stuff, because we had to go in the ropes and and have places for stay, because every time we going to shot, we are staying there for a night, and we are sleeping in the hammocks, in the sleeping bags. We have a food, water supply. So it was 2 barrels with the film stuff, batteries, etc., and another 2 barrels of our life supplies, and another few kilograms of the stuff to going there, ropes, poinies, crawls, and all we need to just going through the cave. Of course, my character took another more stuff as a driller, as you saw on the film, and so yeah, it was a lot of kilograms, but as much, it was a minimum as we had to do it, like, because it was only few people. It was me, my character, his partner, and sometimes I took 1 more person with me, sometimes 2 person to help me to carry that stuff and helping me to going through with it and put the lights on there and there, like, so very small team. No filmmakers, only I was filmmaker, because there are no other filmmakers going to the caves, especially the brand new and dangerous. So all people involved in it were like cave explorers, who's doing it daily.
Vamos lá. Ele usou um mix de técnicas desenvolvidas por ele, na verdade, e foi muito difícil. Ele teve que adaptar muita coisa, fazer de forma mais caseira, realmente, não foi muito profissional, porque o ambiente não permitia um desenvolvimento muito profissional. Então, para levar o equipamento lá para baixo, ele usou ele usou o termo uns barris, então eram uns potes que é usado para fazer conserva. Ele até falou de repolho, e ele é flexível. Então ele colocava o equipamento ali dentro, envolvia com algo mais macio para poder passar, porque tinha algumas partes que as fendas eram muito estreitas, e essa foi a maneira que ele levou o equipamento. A princípio, ele usou 3 tipos de iluminação. Ele citou aqui as câmeras que ele usou. Ele usou uma Lumine G82 e depois ele mudou para uma Light Magic Pocket, e ele adaptou as lentes. Ele percebia que adaptando essa lente ele conseguia uma iluminação melhor. Também levou uns painéis de LED, e as primeiras filmagens foram feitas com esses painéis de LED, mas ele percebeu que ele estava embelezando o ambiente, não era isso que ele queria. Ele tinha filmagens, cenas muito boas da caverna, estava deixando tudo muito lindo, e ele não queria passar essa impressão, ele estava dando a impressão errada da caverna para o público. Ele queria mostrar realmente como que que é um lugar de difícil acesso, sombrio, né? Então, ele deixou de lado os painéis de LED e só usou a pequena câmera. E essas primeiras filmagens foram todas descartadas, ele acabou não usando. E quando ele foi descendo para os níveis mais profundos da caverna, ele usou apenas uma lanterna de mão do tipo militar. Ele colocava atrás de alguma pedra para refletir a água pingando, refletir a fumaça, né, que saía do corpo, no contraste do calor com o frio da caverna, mostrar esses detalhes. Ele usou uma lanterna de mão. O que eles levaram de equipamento foi esses 2 containers com equipamento de filmagem, mais 2 mochilas de suplementos deles, comida, água, saco de dormir, e mais uns 2 quilos de equipamento, tipo corda, equipamento para escalada. foi ele, a equipe era ele, o personagem, mais uma pessoa, eventualmente vinha mais uma ou duas pessoas para descer, ajudar a descer o equipamento. Mas a equipe toda teve no máximo 5 participantes e ninguém era um cineasta profissional, porque realmente só alguém da área, né, de escalada que desceu lá. Não tinha ninguém de equipes profissionais de filmagem.
I can add here one more thing,
Sure.
which can be interesting. That how I make camera safe to not be destroyed with the dust and water there, because this was really homemade stuff. I just because putting camera to the metal cage, as most filmmakers are doing, are not. It can put the camera safe from scratches and something like that, but not make it safe of water. So to not using a kind of like underwater equipment and something like that to make it safe, I just used regular duct tape and to make like with a scissors I make some kind of straps of this tape and put it on the rings of the lenses to make kind of safety, to not let dust and water going inside below the surface of these rings, to not get inside the lenses. So all the time before going to the cave, I was doing it again and again to make it safe, and sticking it to the lens and to the camera, and all buttons on the camera, because camera itself is not was not like prepared for the wet environment. So I putting the painting, like painting tape, because it was very thin, and allow me to put it to the buttons and feel the buttons to use it on the camera. So I covering the all buttons panel with this painting tape, and the lenses and all camera with the duct tape, and made this kind of homemade safety guard for the stuff. Yeah, so
Safety equipment.
yeah.
Ele quis colocar mais um ponto aqui que ele achou muito interessante. As equipes de filmagens profissionais, eles têm as maletas de metal para proteger o equipamento. Mas essa proteção não previne de umidade e água, que era o caso deles lá embaixo na caverna. Então, ele adaptou um modo de segurança, ele recortou a duct tape, fita duct, e colocou nas lentes da câmera para poder levar para lá. E nos botões ele colocou um outro tipo de fita mais fina, porque ele podia ter a sensação, quando ele tocasse nos botões, ele sentiria. E foi assim que ele adaptou essa medida de segurança para não danificar o equipamento. E toda vez que eles desciam para a caverna, ele tinha que fazer todo esse trabalho de encapar os botões e proteger a lente das câmeras.
Ok. A Cíntia Farias, de Campinas, São Paulo, tem uma pergunta. Ela quer saber como foi a logística para filmar Harda, quantas viagens fizeram para o local, qual foi o tipo de equipamento. Acho que essa resposta acho que já foi respondida, né? E afinal é um espaço confinado. E durante a descida estavam em 2 pessoas apenas. Acho que essa também ele respondeu, né? E por fim, quanto adentraram?
Okay, we have a question from São Paulo. Cíntia, foi Cíntia?
Isso, Cíntia.
Cíntia from São Paulo. She asked some questions that had already been answered, but she would like to know how many times did you go down and up, and how deep did you get?
I stopped to numbering these trips there, but it was a lot of it. I think it could be more than 20 times, but not all the times I was going there was for filming. Some trips were just for preparation before filming, and because it was sometimes we had so many stuff to take, like stuff we need to stay there, to organize the staying there for 2 days. For example, once I didn't have prepare my place for sleep, and we have to put a new spits into the rock to make a new place for the hammock. And I have one day trip there just to go with caving stuff, put these spits on the walls, prepare my bed, and 2 days later we came back with for shooting the scenes. Sometimes we have a trip just to firstly put there some food for next coming down, and so I think that with camera I was there maybe about from 10 to 15 times, I think, as I remember properly. And the rest of trips were just for prepare myself, and sometimes my character just wanted to go without camera to check something there. So it was a long process. It was not like we are going week by week. Sometimes we came once and we came again 3 months later, because it was impossible. No one had time, and my character wasn't able to go with me. Sometimes I was going alone or with my friend and camera to make some shots from the surface of the Tatras. So it was few extra days for me too, to have a good weather to shoot these clouds and everything. It was nice for us that we are not living as far away from the mountains. Kraków is about 100 kilometers from the mountains, so it's like most is like 1.5 to 2 hours by car. But the going to the mountains costs a lot of energy, because this cave is in a very high level. It starts in the level of the rocks under the level of the forest, of the plants. So it's higher than 2,000 meters. So just to reach the entrance of the cave, we had to climb for about almost 1,000 meters up, just to reach the entrance. And our bags were about 20 and few more kilos of weight for each one. Mine was even waves more, because no one of our characters wanted to carry my stuff. Sometimes I couldn't find someone to help me carry this stuff, so I had to put all this on my back and go along. So my character doesn't help me with that. He had just his own stuff and he didn't want to share it. And so this was the first part. And the second part, coming inside the cave, the deep of the cave was about, the deepest point we measured was about 128 meters from the entrance, like the difference of the levels when we going like from the first hole in the surface to the deepest point is 128 meters. And the total length of the cave now, I know, is I think more than about 700 meters or some kind of that. It cannot feel that it's a very huge cave, but we have to notice that in Polish Tatras the biggest founds are already done like 20 years ago, 30 years ago. This like gold era of exploring caves, and nowadays finding something in Tatras is big, like new place undiscovered, and the place which has a few hundred meters and more than 100 deep is very rare, and it's like the biggest found in a more than decade. We can notice here too that my character Jarek discovered not only this cave, but during this period when we met each other and we stay in touch together, he discovered 3 more caves, but not in the Tatras, but in the Jura Krakowsko-Częstochowska. It's kind of a place full of rocks and caves in limestone, because in like in Tatras was a different one. It's like Jurassic limestone, and he found 3 more caves, and he has even a kind of award. We have the like Polish exploring awards named Kolosy, and he had like special mention on it on one of these galas through because of these discoveries. So he was very lucky in this, because I know a lot of cave explorers in Poland who wants to try to find a new undiscovered cave, and one of my friends is a very active person. Like he's trying to find these places, exploring a lot. For 10 years he didn't discover anything, and Jarek in 3 years or maybe even if in 2 years discovered 4 new caves. So he's very lucky, or maybe he just have talent for that, for discovering this. Yeah.
Did they put his name on the cave?
Not his name, but he put it name of the cave. Like he has this pleasure to that he can name these places, and the rest of the life, someone have to put this name of the map that this cave named like this, discovered by this man, is on this place.
Okay,
so he is very proud of it. Yeah, yes. That he can put himself in history.
Ele, na verdade, perdeu as contas de quantas vezes eles desceram, mas acredita que mais de 20 vezes. Eles não iam seguidamente, às vezes, por causa do mau tempo, não iam toda semana. Então, às vezes, eles desciam com equipamento, depois desciam com a corda e com os pinos para colocar nas rochas, preparar o lugar para dormir. Nem todas as vezes que eles desceram foi para fazer filmagens. Dessas mais de 20 vezes que ele acredita que eles desceram a caverna, entre 10 e 15 só que foram feitas filmagens. Teve uma situação que eles foram num dia e só conseguiram ir depois 3 meses depois, esperando um tempo correto. Às vezes iam uma noite para filmar as nuvens, então tinha que esperar o tempo certo para filmar lá em cima no topo da caverna. E eles tinham um ponto positivo, que a cidade deles não é muito longe da montanha, em torno de 100 quilômetros, então eles faziam esse trajeto em 1 hora, 1 hora e meia. Era um ponto positivo que eles conseguiam ir com mais frequência. Porém, para entrar na caverna era muito exaustivo, muito desgastante, porque ela tinha mais de 2.000 metros de altura a caverna, e até chegar do topo até a entrada da caverna eram pelo menos 1.000 metros de escalada, então era muito exaustivo para fazer, e sempre todos eles carregando no mínimo 20 quilos de equipamento de bagagem. Ele era o que levava mais peso, porque ninguém queria compartilhar essa tarefa com ele. E o personagem dele, Jarek, quando encontrou essa caverna, ele teve a sorte de achar mais 3 também. Não foi no mesmo local, né? Que é na Tatra polonesa. Foi um outro tipo de... Ele citou aqui Jura, foi em outra região. com rochas diferentes, mas é como um prêmio, porque na Idade Moderna agora achar cavernas tão profundas na Polônia realmente é um achado, e ele teve essa sorte de achar 3. Ele mencionou que outro amigo dele é muito explorador, sempre está em busca de achar lugares novos, e em 10 anos não tinha conseguido achar nenhuma, e esse personagem dele, em 3 anos, achou 4. Essa que eles filmaram em mais 3 cavernas ele descobriu. E uma galeria foi nomeada em nome de Kolosse, que era um desbravador polonês.
Tá certo, muito obrigado. A Sara Cantarino, de Vila Velha, Espírito Santo, quer fazer uma pergunta. Os Altos Tatras são um dos lugares mais fantásticos e muito conhecidos na Eslováquia e Polônia, mas aqui no Brasil são poucas as pessoas que conhecem. Você poderia contar um pouco mais deste lugar para nós?
Sara, from Espírito Santo, she mentioned that the High Tatras in Poland are amazing places, but people in Brazil don't know it very well. So could you tell us a little about this place?
It's as you know, we have a very strong Polish team in the history of alpinism, Himalayism, especially now in winter Himalayism. And most of these Himalayas I know, they always mention that all mountains around the world are very beautiful and very powerful, but always for them Tatras are the most beautiful place, and it will be forever like that. And it is some kind of magic that Tatra mountains are very small, that are so tiny that most people around the world even didn't notice that kind of mountains are here. They are only 20 kilometers wide, and maybe and the height of it is not so impressive to compare to the Alps, because the highest peaks are about 2,700, about something like that. And the topography of these mountains are like, from the west and east side, they are made from limestone, and they are the places where caves are mostly located. And between that west and east, we have a High Tatras, and the High Tatras are made from granite, and this is a more polygon of a regular surface climbing. The thing is that in Polish part of the Tatras are only the 5th part of it. The four parts, like 4/5 of parts, are in Slovakia, the most of it, and only one of the 5th part is in Poland. Like we have just a few pieces of it, but we have even in this small area we have a beautiful valleys and very like iconic walls for climbing, and a lot of caves, because in Poland Tatras are, for cave explorers, Tatras have much more to offer, because a lot of caves are open for cave with the special document. They have a course, and they are like speleologists. And in Slovakia, most of the places that cave exists are in the reservoir of the nature. so they cannot even go to that place, and exploring and trying to find something it's almost impossible. Of course they do it, they exploring, but in the kind of the line of the being like legal, illegal, and maybe sometimes with the document they are scientists or something. But in Poland there are like this west part, when the most caves exist, are in Polish part, because in a Slovakian part the limestone is changing for different kind of rock, and the cave are not located on that side. And from other from Polish side, the north part, the most of the caves exist, and that's the place when Jarek and his friend Wojciech Kuczok, they are together trying to find something, and once they found small crack from inside, they felt the very strong like movement of the air. Then they decided to move some rocks, and piece by piece they open it, and that's how it happened. So firstly, when they found it, it was like, as I told, like little legal, illegal, like there are no rules that regulate this kind of exploring. But when they opened it and started regular exploring, they inform the national park team, and they have special document which allows them to explore this cave. And on this kind of document, I was able to go there too. So Tatras are, you can see on the pictures, Tatras are very beautiful, especially the Slovakian part of High Tatras is very beautiful. There are a lot of valleys, which I always coming back because I'm climbing there too. And it's very nice that you can almost reach by car the entrance to the valley, and in few minutes you see these rocky hills, and you can feel that like you are in some very like climbing area far away from civilization. There is always a very nice place, especially from Slovakian side, to paragliding and gliding, because there is a aeroport in with Aero Club, and they have gliders and flying between the rocks. So sometimes it was nice to see the gliders when I was climbing on some hills, and above my head the gliders were flying. So very nice place, very beautiful mountains, and very small one compared to the Alps. But the thing which is very worth to notice, that they are small, but they are very dangerous in techniques. Like some parts they can be very like, I don't know this word in English, like the rocks can fall. They are not stable, and during winter there are a lot of avalanches going. We have a lot of accidents with avalanches, because technically these mountains are not, because in Alps, as some of my friends who climbs a lot in Alps, if they compare Tatras to Alps, in Tatras we have much more like wide areas which are more stable, and you can feel the level of danger of avalanche and that kind of stuff. And in Polish Tatras, the situation can change every meter. Like you can go one hill climbing without dangers of avalanche, and 100 meters farther it will be very dangerous. And you have to have a very high level of experience to like do all these activities safely. So if you are good in climbing in Tatras, you should be very good climber in the most of other places to climb in the world, because Tatra mountains and technically are preparing you very strong to do this activity.
Então, há muitas pessoas os poloneses costumam escalar os Himalaias. E muita gente que escala os Himalaias falam que não há um lugar como os Tatras, que nenhum outro lugar no mundo tem a magia daquele lugar. São montanhas pequenas, né? Somente um quinto é dividido em 5 partes, e a quinta parte somente é o que ficaria na Polônia. As outras 4 partes ficam com a Eslováquia. E no oeste é feito de calcário, né? Mas ele comentou que está mudando o tipo da rocha, ela está mudando, e na outra parte é de granito. Na Eslováquia, na Polônia, é muito permitido fazer estudos. Então, muitas pessoas entram nessas cavernas para estudar, para descobrir, para explorar, o que não pode ser feito na Eslováquia, porque as cavernas, a montanha lá está em reserva, em parques nacionais, e é contra a lei explorar. Quem faz está infringindo as regras, e na Polônia é permitido fazer esses estudos. Inclusive, o personagem dele, o Jarek, quando descobriu da primeira vez, ele estava dando uma escapadinha, ele não tinha nenhuma permissão, ele entrou nas montanhas por conta própria, né? Entrou na caverna. Quando ele descobriu essa caverna onde foram feitas as filmagens, ele entrou em contato com a administração do parque, e aí sim, a partir daí, eles fizeram toda a documentação autorizando a explorar a caverna. O que ele fala é que a região é maravilhosa, dá para ter acesso fácil com o carro, você pode chegar lá com o carro, e muita gente faz paragliding lá, então você está andando e vê as pessoas fazendo paragliding por cima. Outra coisa que ele fala, são montanhas pequenas, porém muito perigosas, são muito instáveis. Quem já escalou o Himalaia é uma área bem mais vasta, então dá para prever com antecedência avalanches ou mudança repentina, você consegue prever. Já nos Tatras, não. As pedras escorregam muito, não é uma área muito estável, há desmoronamento, e de uma hora para outra a situação pode mudar, o clima pode mudar, pode ocorrer avalanche repentinamente, então é uma área muito perigosa, e só realmente quem é muito profissional, muito experiente, que consegue fazer a escalada. Ele comentou que quem escala os Tatras pode escalar facilmente qualquer outra montanha do mundo, porque requer um nível muito alto de experiência para escalar ela.
Legal, Marisa. Tem uma pergunta da Luana, mas Luana, essa pergunta já foi feita no início. E nós vamos disponibilizar a gente está gravando, né, o debate, essa conversa, e a gente vai disponibilizar no nosso YouTube, tá? É só digitar no YouTube lá, mostra filmes de montanha, que entre hoje e amanhã a gente vai estar disponibilizando essa conversa, tá ok? Acho que já está quase, passou um pouquinho da hora. Eu vou fazer mais 2 perguntas, então, para o Marcin. Uma delas não é sobre o filme, mas é uma questão mais atual, que agora com essa pandemia está tendo uma superpopulação das áreas outdoor, parques, montanhas, por causa dessa pandemia, né? E isso acaba acarretando muitos problemas, principalmente para os parques aqui no Brasil, porque onde o ser humano vai, infelizmente, ele leva muito lixo e não leva embora o lixo, acaba deixando muito lixo lá, acaba também tendo muito focos de incêndio causado pelo ser humano por causa das fogueiras que são feitas de formas não adequadas. Na Polônia, acontece essas coisas também? Como funciona por lá?
Emilio commented that because of the pandemic here in Brazil, there is a overpopulation of outdoor explorers, and wherever they go, they leave trash or they set a fire in a wrong way and causing some fires and forests. And he would like to know if in Poland is happening the same thing.
Um that's the thing that I'm sad about Polish kind of tourists, because I can feel very huge difference between Polish regular tourism in Tatras and Slovakian one. I don't know what caused that, but I have that feeling. Then in Slovakia there are much less people at all in the mountains. Maybe because they are a smaller country and they have most part of the mountains, and maybe that's how it changes. And in Poland, we have in a high season we have a lot of tourists. We are going especially to the few places like Morskie Oko Valley, like Morskie Oko Lake in the end of the valley, and Dolina Kościeliska, which is close to the place when we are going to the caves. It's a lot of people going there. I don't know why they decided just to go to these two directions, as they have all mountains around. I remember one day when on the valley to Morskie Oko, because this valley is like the last valley before the broad of Slovakia, and in this high season, on this only one valley, which is built with the asphalt road going almost to the top to the lake, it was like 15,000 people going that day to that place. And the same day I was next valley, the same kind of beautiful mountain valley, going to beautiful place, just next one, like half kilometer. I could see the road of the Polish valley from that side, because it's like really next to. And sometime I was watching these old tourists going there, and this the same day in the Slovakian valley I met maybe 20 people during all day of going. And we don't have a lot of problem with rubbish, as you explain. Like we I think Polish society has some kind of knowledge that is the nature is the gift for them, and they have to take it and not destroying it. Of course, we have some kind of stupid people who don't care and just putting the especially when is the most crowded place, like Morskie Oko is a like perfect example. Day by day, the people which working in the shelter in this valley, after all day they are going around that lake and taking the rubbish from the surface of the close to the water, because all people, that these thousands of people who going day by day, they always, even in 5% of them, put some rubbish that there is very like dirty place. So day by day, always in the evening, they going and taking this rubbish. But I can observe that most it's growing, like the most experienced are people, like if they are climbers, cave explorers, or like more advanced tourists, the more they care about this nature. And for example, we have like climbers and speleologists, we all have this culture that even when we are going to the mountains and we find some rubbish, we are putting to the bag and taking it ourselves, to not let it stay there. So I can observe much more rubbish placed in like regular forest somewhere, and not in the High Tatras. High Tatras are so small and so many people are taking care of them that they are very clean place. And other mountains around too, like the most, I think, in Poland, the most polluted in this kind of stuffs, displays are in, for example, forest and some valleys close to some villages, like on the countryside in the middle of the Poland, somewhere like that. So when they are like people without the culture, just people from living there, and they sometimes, yeah, we can but I think that the worst part of this period no one cares about it, and we had a situation in Poland like 15 years ago that people doesn't wanted to pay for taking the rubbish from the home, so they are putting it to the forest, like I don't know, like plastic bags, everything. They living in the forest, and I remember that this vision that we have this like dumped like wild dumped site somewhere in the middle of the forest. But now it's like we can name it kind of pathology, and it's a marginal stuff. So yeah, we have this. I think we have this culture. Maybe it could be different when it will be not such a small place and everyone taking care of it. Maybe when we live on that kind of country as Austria or some other, which most of the country live in the mountains, maybe we can observe the people used to it and not treat it like a kind of precious for them. So yeah, we don't have that problem. So we have, of course, in the national park regulamin, we have like points that we can't stay in the mountains for a night, and we can't put the fire, and we can use even open fire. It was it was funny situation that we argue with people from the speleology society, that we are showing in the film that we are using open fire inside the cave, and it's like if we can have stick to the rules, it's forbidden. So and we are, even when you are using a gas, so it's forbidden because it's open fire, and you can't use open fire in the mountains. So that's kind of illegality, but of course everyone doing this because it's safe and it doesn't destroy anything. But yeah, we have these rules that for example we can't stay for a night in the mountains, but climbers have to. Sometimes if they want to climb very hard route, they have to stay in the mountains and start climbing even 2 hours before sun rising to finish on time. So I think the rules are more like to not let the like regular tourists without preparation to do it on a mass level, because when it will be not forbidden, it could be problem, as you are talking, that people can put the fire and a lot of people will be stay for a night. The animals couldn't feel safe in this place. So there are rules a few people can broke, but the all masses have to be like these rules have to be, because without this it shouldn't work like it works now, that the Tatras are clean and animals have some time during night to feel safe, and we are not alone there.
Yeah.
So everything is for us, but we have to do it in like a gentle way and in the intelligent way to not destroy what we got. So
Sure.
that's the thing. Yeah, but during pandemic we have even a situation, I don't know, it was kind of stupid thing, but for a while they closed Tatras. It was a very ridiculous thing, like why? So people for a while, even the government closed for a few weeks forests. People couldn't go to the forest, and every people starting riots because why we can't go to the forest, because the forest is the most safe place now. There is no one there, and yeah, and after 3 weeks I think they changed this rule, but Tatras were closed to 1.5 months, like we couldn't go to the Slovakia. In Slovakia, the Tatras were opened, but we couldn't go to another country because it was blocked, and Polish side of Tatras were closed. So every climbers are watching a beautiful weather. The season is going, and they can't go to the mountains doing the activities. So it was very frustrating time for them, because it was like the best season. I remember it was the best season for ski touring and the best season for like winter climbing in March, and and no one could that. So, but we will see how it will be next year. I hope it will be much better. Yeah.
A situação Eslováquia-Polônia deixa ele um pouquinho triste, porque ele não entende por que tantas pessoas, tantos turistas vão para os Tatras poloneses e poucos vão do lado eslovaco. É bem próximo, ele comentou que teve um dia num local que fica ali ao pé dos Tatras, que chama Vale Marskioko. Nesse dia, ele conta que mais de 15 mil pessoas subiram ali a montanha, e ele estava subindo também, estava próximo, e ele conseguia, da área que ele estava, ele conseguia ver o lado eslovaco. E ele via aquela fila de carros subindo no lado polonês e ninguém do lado da Eslováquia. E ele comenta que ele achou que nesse dia umas 20 pessoas só estavam lá do lado da Eslováquia, enquanto 15 mil turistas subiam a montanha no lado polonês. Mas que apesar dessa grande quantidade de turistas, o povo polonês acredita que a natureza é um presente divino e eles sempre respeitam. Claro, vou usar a palavra deles, sempre tem um idiota que deixa lixo para trás, e que as pessoas mais experientes, quem costuma escalar mais, se preocupa muito com essa questão do lixo. Então, sempre que eles estão escalando, encontram um lixo que alguém deixou, eles catam, colocam na mochila para levar de volta. E nessas áreas de acampamento próximo, onde o pessoal que trabalha no parque sempre, diariamente, faz a limpeza, porque sempre alguém deixa, ele diz uns 5% de quem está lá, dos turistas, acaba deixando lixo. Então, a limpeza é feita diariamente. Ele conta também que nos vales mais próximos dos vilarejos, ele diz que são mais poluídos do que nesses parques nacionais. E que há uns 15 anos atrás, quando não tinha o serviço de coleta de lixo, os moradores juntavam todo o lixo e descartavam na floresta. Então, quando chegava lá, parecia que era um lixão, um aterro sanitário, porque todo mundo acabava descartando por lá. E há pontos permitidos na montanha que pode acampar, pode fazer fogueira, mas em outros não, e eles, como montanhistas lá em cima, né, na caverna, lá em cima na montanha, segundo a lei não é permitido, mas eles, como escaladores, têm que fazer isso. Então é uma situação um pouco ambígua, porque eles de alguma maneira estão infringindo a lei, mas ele acredita que as regras têm que ser feitas porque há muito turista inexperiente, e ele acredita que é por isso que é feitas essas regras, para não acabar não causando algum tipo de acidente ou, né, algo mais grave com essas pessoas, os turistas inexperientes. Outra coisa que ele cita, que o povo polonês ficou muito chocado, que no início da quarentena, em março, fecharam os parques e fecharam os Tatras, e houve até protestos. Isso durou alguns dias, era proibido ir para as florestas, e o povo ficou chocado, né, que floresta, que era o lugar mais seguro, onde não tinha ninguém, as pessoas não podiam ir. Mas que esse fechamento durou só uns 3 dias, e foi numa época que era em março, ótima para esquiar, ninguém podia ir às montanhas esquiar, só conseguiam ver o lado eslovaco, onde estava permitido, mas não podiam atravessar para outro país tampouco. Então, para eles foi uns dias bastante complicados.
Tá certo, muito obrigado. E a última pergunta, para ele deixar referências fílmicas ou livros, pode ser polonês ou não, para a gente, que ele utilizou para fazer o filme dele ou que ele acha importante para deixar para a gente agora, alguma referência fílmica ou texto, alguma coisa assim. Última pergunta.
Could you mention any movie or book, maybe something that you used before filming? Could you indicate to our participants any biography or any book, any movie related to the caves, the mountains?
There is one book. Is named Chiński Maharaja, and maybe
Emilio,
can you write, please?
can you type for us, please?
I will send you a link. Okay, you can.
Oh, great,
I will send on
great.
chat. I will
Thank you
send
so
a
much.
link. I don't know. It will be translated like if you have translated. Because it's because I understand you're asking about Polish like stuff, not like international.
In general, if you have any,
In general.
yeah, can be Polish, of course. Anything you
Of course,
watched or
it
read.
was. This is very nice if you have option to find is a book of Wojciech Kurtyka. You probably know Wojciech Kurtyka, and it's the book about his philosophy of climbing, of what mountains and climbing means to him. And it's very interesting one because he's kind of not a kind of sport guy with just climbing to achieve something, but he's very like have a deep philosophy in it. And this book, if you have be able to find it on the English, for example, probably it is translated. So I will send you a link to the Polish site, but you can through this name you can maybe try to find it. I will send to everyone. I remember that I was very very impressed of the film of one Polish filmmaker, Jerzy Surdel. I will share you a link for YouTube for this film. He made a trilogy, a short trilogy of the films about climbing. It was made many years ago in a black and white film tape, and it's kind. This is actually the film I will share to you. It was film I was very inspiring in this kind of storytelling without words, making my film. And it's about the climbers, but the story is if you see this film, you will understand what I like. What it means, like after seeing my film, you will find this inspiration in this. I will wait a second. I will find it. Yes, it's 19 minutes long, and music is beautiful, and this all editing so many years ago, it's so perfect. It's so perfect that it still works without any like feeling that it's old film. Like it's very universal story. Another like film stuff is film of my mentor, Marcin Koszałka. He made a film who won a lot of mountain and international mountain film festivals. It's a film, Declaration of Immortality. It is in Polish on YouTube. But if you ask maybe someone, a sales agent or someone, maybe you can find the English version, because it's a specific story too, about the climber who has a problem with himself, that he's getting older and he will be not as powerful as he was before. And it's kind of the same story, like arguing with author of the film, with Marcin. They are arguing about the art, what they are doing. He's doing a climbing art, he's doing a film art, and they are like kind of partners in it, and it's about this kind of philosophy. Very interesting story. So if you ask, you have a contact to Katarzyna Wilk. Katarzyna Wilk from Kraków Film Foundation she can share you an English version of this film.
Okay.
She's a sales agent of it. So this is film I remember when I started studying in a film school, and I watched this film for the first time in the television. It was one screening in television, and it was like, I don't know, like 10 years ago. And I remember that I watched this film. It was like, it stays here like till today, that I watched this film so many times, and it's kind of the film that the more time I'm watching it, I finding deeper and deeper stuff in after this story. So it's very interesting. It's a pity that the old trilogy of Jerzy Surdel is not allowed online. Maybe if I find some way to find these films, I can share. But I've online on YouTube I found only this one black and white film. But it's really worth to see. Another film from a cinematic way. I was really impressed of this film, which is on Netflix now. It's named The Mountain. It's a very beautiful cinematic story about mountain activity at all. Like I name it is like the biggest and the widest showreel of mountain cinematography, because there are so many beautiful shots in there. The story is not so deep. It's like very simple story about it, just the people going to the mountains. But how it's filmed is very impressive for me as a filmmaker. The way how many scenes, how many energy, how many techniques they use to film that. Probably I could have a much more things, but on this hour I'm not so fresh in the mind to to come with something.
Little late, right?
Yeah, it's 2:41 now in Poland.
Oh my.
Yes.
Ok. Então, ele citou um livro, que ele colocou o link aqui também, que é outro livro que ele menciona que é sobre a filosofia da escalada. Ele colocou o link aqui também para a gente. E nesse livro, o autor, ele aborda mais o lado filosófico da escalada e não o atleta em si. Ele mostra todos os aspectos mais profundos e não atléticos de uma escalada. Ele cita aqui também uma trilogia, que ele colocou o nome no link. Em polonês eu realmente não conseguiria jamais. Essa trilogia é em preto e branco, tem mais de 10 anos, é uma trilha sonora incrível, e ele diz que essa história é magnífica, é perfeita, e apesar de ser muito antigo, se adequa muito bem. É uma história que não passa. Ela sempre vai fazer sentido em qualquer momento da vida que você assistir. Não é algo que sai, vamos dizer, sai de moda. Um outro filme que ele cita Let's see if I can pronounce the name. Kochauto? Kochauto is that?
Koszałka.
Kochaut. Okay. Maitre
Koszałka.
Kochaut. Okay.
Marcin Koszałka.
Martin Koszałka.
Perfect.
Ele considera o mentor dele. Quem assistiu o filme dele e assistir esse filme do Martin vai perceber que tem muitos aspectos que ele pegou desse filme. Outro é a Declaração de Imortalidade desse autor, Martin, e que há uma briga entre o autor e o amigo dele, ou um quer ver o aspecto artístico da escalada, o outro quer ver o aspecto de filmagem mais profissional. Um outro filme que ele cita, que está no Netflix, que é A Montanha, que ele diz que é mais uma atividade adulta de escalador. Diz que a história não tem nada demais, a história não é lá essas coisas, mas a fotografia, as técnicas de filmagem, a maneira como foi filmada é muito interessante. Então, isso que ele achou muito interessante nesse filme, ele indica também para assistirem, que está no Netflix.
I have one more film. I will share you a trailer to it. Maybe you will find it somewhere. It's more about caves and diving in the caves. It's a diving into the unknown, and it's I don't know, it's a Finnish film, probably Finnish, from Finland. They made it, and the action took place in Norway when. I will not spoiler you the action, but it's in a trailer, so you can see. I watched that film and he very impressed me because it's a very like universal story. Put it to the very very specific place as a caves. So this film impressed me too, as how they managed to build this story to feel like all the time during this film that pressure of dangerous and the achievement what the people do. So about going underground, this film was very impressive for me, especially that is a diving in a case, the most dangerous sports as you can imagine in the mountain activities. So yeah, very 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 strong film too for me.
Outro filme que ele cita também, colocou o link aqui do trailer, que é O Mergulho ao Desconhecido. É um filme sobre mergulho em cavernas. É um filme norueguês. Ele não vai contar, não vai dar spoiler, mas o que impressionou ele na história é como eles, no filme, é como eles colocaram na história, no enredo, o desafio e as conquistas, as dificuldades, colocaram isso na história de mergulho em cavernas, adaptaram a isso.
Ok, muito obrigado ao Marcin, Marisa também muito obrigado, a Sara, obrigado a todos que estão participando, que fizeram perguntas, os que não fizeram, e o Marcin que está aqui já é quase, eu acho que 3 horas na Polônia, né? Muito obrigado, Marcin, por aceitar esse convite de estar aqui conosco, compartilhando seu conhecimento, sua experiência, como foi o filme. E parabéns pelo filme. E espero que ano que vem nos vejamos novamente com um filme seu na mostra, um novo filme na mostra.
Marcin, Emilio gives you the thank you. Thank you so much for being so late. We understand our time zone is a little different, and he hopes we can have you next year again here for the festival, and congratulations on your movie.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. It was a very pleasure for me to share time with you now.
Foi um prazer dividir esse tempo com vocês.
Ok. É isso aí. Muito obrigado a todos. Vamos ficar por aqui. E lembrando que semana que vem tem mais filmes, a programação, tudo você pode ver no nosso Instagram, @MFM Brasil, tá ok? Boa noite a todos e até mais.
Boa noite. Good night,
Tchau, tchau.
Martin. Bye
Good night.
bye.
Good night. Have a nice another happenings of festival.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye. Good night.
É isso aí.
I have to leave now, yeah? I have to click leave.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably. Okay.
Ok, bye bye.
Okay. Bye.